Science on Tap event. We're glad that you all could make it and for joining us virtually to talk science. For those who don't know, Science on Tap is an event that we've organized where members from the community that surround Cal Poly Pomona can come and explore the latest ideas of science and technology that are occurring here at Cal Poly Pomona. Our goal is for these events, our goal of these events is to bring scientists from Cal Poly Pomona out of the lab in the classroom and bring them into the community so they can interact with the members of the community and have a dialogue over drinks and dinner. Usually we held these events at Fitbit Works on the campus of Cal Poly Pomona, but due to the pandemic, we shifted these events to a virtual format, which isn't always the best. However, one of the benefits is we can invite many people from many different areas, and we've had really great turnouts, and we're thankful that you have all joined us tonight. So in the spirit of Science on Tap, I do encourage you to grab your age-appropriate drink of choice as we proceed with tonight's presentation. Tonight we have Dr. Zakkoyya Lewis-Trammell speaking about the wearable fitness trackers with her talk, which is entitled, "Come On Fitbit, Make Me Fit." She'll be speaking about how even though these popular trackers are capable of monitoring everything, including our health, steps, heart rate, exercise intensity, more, how are they able to make us fit? And also she'll address which of the many wearables might be right for you. Dr. Lewis is an assistant professor of exercise science here at Cal Poly Pomona, and she joined the university in 2019. So she's a relatively new faculty member. She attended Loyola Marymount University, where she earned her BS in athletic training before going to the University of Texas Medical Branch, where she earned her PhD in 2017 in rehabilitation science. She then went into the private sector where she worked as a behavioral researcher and exercise physiologist for Beachbody, a large fitness company. There she designed and performed health assessments for millions of customers. She then decided to leave the private sector, I guess, to seek out opportunities for research and also teaching. And so that's where she has joined Cal Poly Pomona. She's had many accomplishments, including over 17 peer-reviewed publications in journals. She's attended or presented at many multiple local and national meetings. She was awarded an American Health Association grant. She's received multiple certifications and numerous honors. And so I'm going to turn the time over. I do want to explain how we do questions. Generally, during the presentation, if you have a question, just throw it in the chat, and then I will interject and interrupt the talk and ask those questions. But at the end, we'll definitely open up where you can ask your questions yourself. And you can turn on your mics and your cameras if you want to and ask those questions. And so with that, let's welcome Dr. Zakkoyya Lewis as she talks about, "Come on, Fitbit, make me fit."
Thank you, Dr. Durant, for that introduction. Yes, my talk today is on "Come on, Fitbit, make me fit," really to discuss what wearables are, how they work, and how you can best find one that fits your needs. So Dr. Durant kind of went into it with my background, but I'll just go ahead and start. I have been working with wearable related research for the last 8 years, have gotten several publications out of that. And I've looked at wearables on every end of it. So I've looked to see how valid they are at measuring your steps in physical activity, how the devices, their features, like what's embedded within them and how that relates to the behavioral science, and how well they are within interventions at actually increasing your lifestyle physical activity. And all of this work has come to fruition. And later this year, I do have a book chapter on this topic that will be published in the Cambridge Handbook of Cyber Behavior, coming out sometime this year. The pandemic kind of slowed it down, but I've been told it's coming soon. But I can say to start that these wearable fitness trackers do work. They will help you become more physically fit, but it's always nice to know how exactly they work. I will say that I am going to try to keep this as casual conversation as possible. So please don't worry, and please feel free to interrupt me with your questions so we can keep it more of a conversation. But what we'll be talking about specifically, first and foremost, what are wearables? What biometric information is collected by the wearables? And what does that biometric information say about your health? How do these device features relate to behavior change? And ultimately, which wearable is right for you? So to start, what are wearables? Up until this point, I have been referring to them as wearables, but they come by many, many names. A fitness tracker is the one that is acknowledged by the research field. If you went to like PubMed.com or wanted to look at some research database, fitness tracker is the one term that you should use to find exactly what we're talking about. But they're also referred to as pedometers. They're early predecessors, the ones that you just clip on your hip and measure your steps as you walk around. Wearables, as I've mentioned several times, accelerometer, activity watch, activity monitor, smartwatch, activity tracker, all of these names really come up to the same thing. So I have a common definition for these types of devices. I refer to them as a wearable device that objectively measures lifestyle physical activity and can provide feedback beyond the display of basic activity count information via the monitor display or through a partnering application to elicit continual self-monitoring of activity behavior. In other words, it is a device that will measure your physical activity for you. So you don't have to go around actually manually counting every step that you're taking. It will measure it for you. It will tell your phone what you're doing, and you can look at it through an app. And it will tell you not only how many steps, but what you can do to increase your steps or increase your physical activity. It will give you tips and tricks. It's just a lot more interactive and a lot more meaty data than just your basic step count. And there are several different wearable fitness trackers out there on the market. They first proliferated the market in around 2009, at least that's when Fitbit started with their early devices. And since then, it's been kind of gangbusters. There are several different brands that make wearables, and within each brand, there are several different models. So CNET.com did put out a list of the best trackers in 2001. And at the top of that list were two Fitbit models. So the Fitbit Charge 4 and the Fitbit Inspire 2, followed by the Xomi Mi Band 4, then the Nerve Run insoles, and to round out the top 5, the Apple Watch Series 3. And if you're not familiar with what any of those devices look like, I can tell you that this image includes none of those 5 devices because there are so many out there and available on the market. Although within recent years, Fitbit, Apple Watch, Garmin, there's a few who have almost taken a monopoly of the wearable market, but there are still several lesser known brands out there and different models. So there's really something out there for everyone. And not only that, but they keep advancing. So each year, specifically around the holidays, they're going to come out with a new version, like Fitbit Charge 5, perhaps, to always keep upgrading the technology. But even though the technology is upgrading, the general principles and the general features of the device will always remain the same. So how do they work? Well, I am going to walk us through how the Fitbit works, since that was part of my title and it is one of the most popular brands out there. But all the different brands work in the same way and give the same type of information. So how does a Fitbit work? So you have your Fitbit band and you can wear it on your wrist. They do have some of the older ones that you can wear it as a clip on your waist, but vast majority of them are now wristwatches. And that will sync to your phone via Bluetooth, and it will partner with the Fitbit app. And when you open up the Fitbit app, you'll see several different things. So this is what the example of the homepage looks like. And this isn't even the whole homepage. You have to scroll down, but we're going to walk through it. So on the homepage, you first see in the top right corner a mailbox, a little notification. If you have a friend request, that's going to come in here. There is that social feature within there. And you'll also get some alerts from Fitbit about, some promotional stuff like new devices that are coming out, but also related to your own activity and how you can increase it. You also have the date with arrows going on either side, which means you can look at today, you can look at yesterday, the day before that, the day before that, all the way until the inception of when you first started your Fitbit. So you always have an archive of your data. The biggest thing you're going to see on any of the devices is your physical activity. And the way that Fitbit has it monitored here is your calorie burn. And you can see that circle that's encasing your calorie burn number that shows you how close you are to your goal. So in this example, very, very close to the goal. The circle's not complete just yet, but on the way there. Underneath that, and within the devices, you can actually change the toggles a little bit. So if there are some behaviors that you're more interested in, you could actually bring it up closer to the top and move some closer to the bottom. But this is the default for Fitbit. So underneath your calorie burn, you can track your mindfulness. Again, there's a goal that is there for the mindfulness of 5 days of taking a moment to breathe. In this example, haven't gotten close to the goal, but you can see where you are on track. Under the mindfulness, you have your exercise. So how many days per week are you meeting your goal for planned activity? Are you exercising? And then as you keep scrolling down, the new Fitbit models also allow women to track their menstrual cycle. Not all wearable devices do that. Fitbit is one of them that does. But you also track your weight. So if you have a weight goal set for yourself, you can see where you are in relation to that. And then you can also track your nutrition. So logging your water, making sure you're staying hydrated, and then also logging your food. This will actually sync with another application outside of Fitbit, but you can see it all in one place. So all of your health behaviors in one place on this first screen. But there's also some extra menus toward the bottom. So right now we're looking at the Today tab. So this is looking at our activity for today. If you were to go into one of these other menus, if you click Today, that would bring you back to this home screen so you can see all of your activity. There's a Discover page, and this is where we get into some really cool behavioral support, so programming, tips, instructional videos, those kind of things. Then we have our community, where you can build community with people you know and people you don't know, just to have some sort of support. And premium, since it is a commercial company, it's going to have its upgrade option, right? So there's some premium features that you can purchase. I will say that all that I'm showing you right now is what comes standard when you get the device. So when you spend as much as $50 to a couple $100 on a device, you do get some behavioral support, but if you need a little bit extra, there's always that upcharge there. And because we live in the times that we live in, these wearable trackers also have updated some COVID-19 information. There's actually some really interesting work and data going on of how your wearables, because of all the biometric data it collects, how it can detect your exposure or your risk to COVID-19, just looking at like your heart rate and other measures. I'm not going to go into that, but it's something interesting that's happening within the field. So now let's go through and talk a little bit more about what each one of those behaviors actually says about your health. So let's go with calories. That was the first big thing that we saw on the home screen. So in Fitbit, the calories that you see are actually a combination of your resting calories and your exercise calories. If you didn't know, those are actually two different things. So your resting or basal calories are the calories that you burn if you were to just lay in bed all day and do nothing. Because even if you lay in bed all day and do nothing, you still have to burn calories to digest your food, to blink your eyes, for, just for your normal body to function, it will burn some calories. So those are what we know as our resting calories. Anything we do on top of that are our activity and exercise calories. And there's several different ways for you to keep track of that. Your resting calories are pretty dependent on your weight, sex, age, and height. Whereas your exercise calories, again, are exact representation of the activity that you're doing. So if you didn't have a Fitbit or any other type of wearable fitness tracker, you could use the body weight planner. It's available through the National Institute of Health. If you just Googled NIH body weight planner, this would come up and it gives you an idea of how many calories that you burn throughout a day. Like I said, the resting calories are going to be dependent on your weight, sex, age, and height. But in this scenario, since you don't have a wearable fitness tracker, it's going to estimate your physical activity level. And it has a few indicators for that. So a 1.4 is sedentary. That's you have a sedentary job, working from home in a pandemic, going from your desk to your bed to your kitchen. That's pretty much all you're doing. You're going to be more sedentary versus at the very higher end is a 2.5, whereas you're very active. You spit that into this calculator and it'll give you an estimation of how many calories you're burning. Whereas if you had a wearable fitness tracker, that would give you a more accurate depiction of how many calories you're burning because it knows the amount of activity you're really doing and not just using a number placeholder. So under calories, we had mindfulness. Within the Fitbit device itself and several others, it has some guided meditations or at the bare minimum, just alerts for you to take a moment, be still, be calm, and breathe. Because there is a lot of research that shows a connection between your mindfulness and your mental state and your overall health. So it's really a holistic approach to your total wellness. Now, exercise was next, but I'm gonna get into that a little bit more in just a second. I wanna go through these other behaviors that you can monitor on these apps. So I'll get into the menstrual cycle next. If you choose to keep track of your menstrual cycle within the app, this is what it looks like. It shows the days of menstruation versus ovulation and helps you keep track of your menstrual cycle. And you can also see trends over time. So again, a whole holistic approach to your total health. And then it has your weight and you can keep a weight goal. So your weight also gives an indicator for your BMI, or the app will also give you an indicator of what your BMI is. So what is the BMI? That is your body mass index, and it's a relationship between your height and your weight, and it will classify you as underweight, normal, overweight, and obese, depending on where you lie. So the cutoff points for a normal BMI is a 18.5 to a 25. Anything under the 18.5 is considered underweight. Anything over the 25 is considered overweight or obese. I will say that this is not the best indicator for your total body composition because it treats fat and muscle the same. However, the more muscle you have, the more health benefits you're going to have from that versus the more fat that you have. So it's not a perfect scale by any means, but it will let you know where you fall in terms of your weight class when you put in your weight on this device. And then you're able to track your nutrition, both your water and your food consumption. So if you're interested to learn more about where your goals should be or what your distribution between carbs versus fat, protein, how many vegetables should I be eating throughout the day, you can go to choosemyplate.gov. That gives the US dietary guidelines for not just adults, but all citizens. And the Fitbit app, which again partners with another app for nutrition, but it will help to show you where you fall within the US guidelines. So now let's go back a minute toward exercise. All those other behaviors are just on that home screen on the Fitbit. But if you were to click exercise, you have a lot more information that pops up, a lot more screens. So let's walk through those. Starting with the far left, this is the first screen that you'll see when you click on exercise. And on this, it goes back to your goal at the top. You see for the week of January 12th through the 18th, only met the goal of exercise 1 out of 4 days. And just under that, you can see the exercise that was completed for that week. And it will tell you the time, the calories burned, your heart rate, and then what heart zone that you were in. And then as you see below that, it goes for each following weeks and how you've been on your goals. If you were to click on that sport, the middle screen pops up. And in this middle screen, again, it recounts the exact time that you're doing that workout. So in this instance, 29 minutes, 52 seconds, the calories burned, and your average heart rate of 116 beats per minute. Below that, it gives you a graph of your heart rate zone. And the 4 heart rate zones that are listed here are going to be your peak, so at your max effort, your cardio zone, which is very vigorous effort, your fat burn, which is more light to moderate. You know, you're huffing, you're puffing a little bit, you're sweating a little bit, but you're able to carry on a conversation throughout that workout. And the below the zone, which is basically a resting heart rate. So how do all of these different heart rate zones relate to you? Well, it's primarily based on your age. So the most simple calculation is 220 minus your age. But if you can't remember that, there's always a handy dandy chart that looks like this. So let's use 30 years as an example. For this individual, the potentially maximum heart rate is 190 beats per minute. That's saying your heart can it's on average 190 beats per minute. It's not going to pump any more than that. But the closer you get to that number, the more vigorous of a workout you're doing. So overall target heart rate zone for an individual who's in their 30s should be between 95 and 162 beats per minute. This is somewhere between that fat burn zone, which is about 50 to 70% of that max, and that cardio zone, which is closer to the 70 to 85% of that max heart rate. And again, if you can't remember this chart, Fitbit will remember it for you, and it will show you those graphs for each of your workouts. And you can also see not only your zone on average for the entire workout, but exactly what your heart rate was doing. So for this example, the average was 116, but you can see that little toggle in the middle that said the maximum was 133 at a given time, but there were, mountains and valleys within the workout. It wasn't a stable 116 across the board. As you scroll down, you also see your calories burned. Now this graph is going to look very similar to your average heart rate throughout the workout because they're interrelated. But if you're interested, you can see, at what point of your workout were you burning the most calories. So if you're doing an intense workout and you remember like, oh, I almost fell out 15 minutes in, that was really hard. I wonder how many calories I burned. You can go back to this graph and you can see exactly how many calories you burned at that moment during your workout.
Dr. Koy, I have a question here.
Yeah.
So the question is, from the exercise section, what information do you need to put in for that?
So the only information you'll need to put is when you first set up your device, you'll need to put in your sex given at birth, your age, and your weight. After that, once you're wearing your device, it will pick up your heart rate and all of this other fantastic biometric information will be populated.
Thank you.
Yeah, that answers the question. And the last cool thing that you can see from the exercise tab is the actual calories burned in relation to your overall calorie burn. Because remember, the calorie goal is a combination of your resting and your exercise. So you can see how this particular workout contributed to your overall calorie burn. So that's the exercise feature and most of the behavioral things that you can monitor. But what are some other features within the device and why? So as I mentioned before, there is a community tab. And at the top, you can see there's your feed, your friends, and your group, and then you can, add another friend. So the friends within this community tab are those that you know personally, friends and family who you want to have friendly competition with, and you can add each other and be Fitbit friends. You can see their activity and kind of compete with one another or share encouragement with one another. You also have your groups. So these groups are established by Fitbit amongst Fitbit users. So odds are you're not going to know a lot of people in this group. On this feed is an example of the at work group. So anyone who wants to join this group can join this group as long as they have a Fitbit account. And you could still have a sense of community through those groups. In this example, someone shared that they received the Monarch Migration Badge, which means that they've had 2,500 lifetime miles with their Fitbit. Other things that people post, like, just pictures, like, at work, trying to get through the day, I want to go up my steps, or like, it's hard for me to get my steps, I have no motivation. And you can send each other encouragement that way. And with your friends, as I mentioned, there's competition. You can see a leaderboard. So you can see how you compare to your other friends in terms of physical activity. There's also programs. So within the Discover tab on Fitbit, you can have different guided programs that kind of walk you through. So the premium featured guided program here in the center is like getting active, just getting started, because we all know that could be a huge hurdle. The hardest step is just getting up and doing it, right? So they have some guided programs. If you wanted to start training for something, you could have that additional support here, or just fun challenges like the Get Fit Bingo, where maybe the goal is, okay, get 10,000 steps this day, do a yoga workout this day, do a CrossFit workout this way. You don't know, it's just a Fitbit bingo. So there's different things that you can sign up for in order to keep you engaged in your exercise. And I will say, again, I'm going through Fitbit examples here, but a lot of different wearables have different types of programming features very similar to this. You also have badges. So these are your virtual rewards, right? Because I'm sure we've all heard a story of someone who went out for a long, long walk or exercise and said, oh, I wasn't wearing my Fitbit, it doesn't count. I'm not going to get credit for it because they're not going to get a badge for it. So Fitbit will reward you for being active with different badges and trophies. Some of the badges, some of them are surprises. So it's could be a special little motivator if you know that I want to get to that Monarch badge, for instance. I want to get my 2,500 lifetime miles. Or if you're just having a slow day and you just get a badge and you didn't even know you were going to get it, that can be a motivator to keep going and continue to do the same thing tomorrow. You also have your history. So like I said, on that home screen, you can go back to yesterday, all the way until the inception of when you started the device. So you can see your own personal trends and where you are within your calorie goal, your weight goal, your exercise goal, all of your goals. So where you were in the last week versus where you are in the last month, 3 months, 1 year. It's always very interesting. Like we all I all get a little bit of a lull in the winter because that nice and cozy, it's rainy outside, I don't necessarily want to go out, but when you compare to when spring hits, you see that spike. So you can always look at how your activity compared to you over the course of a month, 3 months, or a year. So all of those features are different forms of behavioral support beyond just tracking your behavior, such as exercise and nutrition. So last year, I actually completed a study with other Cal Poly students to really analyze all of these features that are on 9 different devices. This is actually my second analysis of this. Did the original one in 2014, but we wanted to do an update because the world of wearable fitness trackers has changed a lot with its proliferation. We wanted to do an update to see what are the latest features and what is the common standard of the devices right now. And all of those, the community, the lifetime tracking, the guided programs, those have become standard. And why are they even important? Well, they are amongst a list of 93 other behavioral change techniques that a lot of researchers have put together this taxonomy, or really it's just a educated list of reviewing literature that says like, hey, we reviewed all the behavioral research that's been out there, and we have found that these 93 techniques will help people change their behavior, whether that behavior is physical activity or smoking or diet, whatever it is, these 93 techniques will help people change their behavior. Hence the name behavior change techniques. So in that study I did with the students is we looked at these 93 techniques to see how many were prevalent among the wearable devices. And the ones that are in bold were the most present, well, not the most prevalent, they were prevalent across all 7 devices that we looked at. So feedback and monitoring, it kind of comes with the territory of wearable fitness trackers, honestly, because it wouldn't be a wearable fitness tracker by my definition if it didn't monitor your behavior, if it didn't track your steps, and then tell you how you did. Biofeedback, which is being able to tell you your heart rate and also your breathing rate. And some other ones have more advanced that can look at your VO2 max, which is a form of your fitness, or an indicator of your fitness rather. The biofeedback was not something that was prevalent in the early stages of wearable fitness trackers, back in 2010s, but it's standard now. Social support, as we saw, the community devices will either have that group availability. So within that Fitbit world, you can get a Fitbit group, but all of them at the very least allow you to friend someone that you know who also has the device. Prompts and cues. This is your device letting you know that you need to move. Either it's an alert like, hey, get up, you've been sitting too long, go ahead and get standing, or an alert saying, hey, you're like 5 minutes away from your exercise goal, go for a 5-minute walk right now to meet it. Those little nudges, I'll say, to help keep you going, to keep you on track with your goals. And the last thing that's prevalent across all these devices is a non-specific reward. That is that virtual badge, that virtual trophy that kind of gives you, your gold star, like you're doing it, good job, keep it going. And across the devices that we looked at, well, rather the brands that we looked at several different devices within these brands, but Fitbit did have the most behavioral change techniques embedded within the device. So this is not a promotion for Fitbit, but in theory, Fitbit is most inept to help change your behavior because it includes the most behavioral change techniques. Followed by that, we have the Garmin devices, a Mace Fitbit, followed by the Galaxy Watch, Withing Steel HR, and then rounding out the list is the Apple Watch. So another study, not mine, but it looked at how these devices can empower overall health. And one thing that they found was, and I'll quote, making use of the self-regulation theory as theoretical framework, we developed a model that proposes 6 system-specific elements: attractiveness, monitoring, feedback, privacy protection, readability, and gamification as determinants of health empowerment and thereof health commitment. In other words, the more attractive the device is, the ability to actually monitor what it says it's going to monitor, in this case, your physical activity. If it gives you feedback, will it protect your privacy? Can you read it? Is it useful? And is it engaging? Those are 6 factors that allow people to stay committed to their health and they feel empowered with their health. So with that being said, and after the study, in the one that we looked at the behavioral change techniques, we looked at the other features as well. The other features that would ultimately affect someone's use of the device. So those features that we looked at is its functionality. Will the battery die after a day? Or do I need to charge it all the time? Or can it last more than a week without charging? Will it monitor other behaviors I'm interested in? Like, yes, physical activity is great, but I need a lot of sleep help too, or nutrition, or sedentary behavior. we have a question?
Yeah, just going along with that, there is a question here about the sleep. That somebody said they've heard that Apple Watch will alert the wearer if they have a medical. Wait, sorry, going to the sleep question. I'm sorry. I noticed my Fitbit has light and different metal on the inside that lays on the skin. What are these things doing, and how is the sleep feature meaningful?
So those metal features on the Fitbit are basically the biometric sensors that help to pick up your heart rate, depending on which brand that you have. I will say in the past, I've heard reports, some people are really, really sensitive to these sensors and can actually feel it. Other people may not notice it, but that's what's helping to get, especially the heart rate data. And the newer devices will also pick up on your O2 saturation, so your oxygen saturation, which is kind of relevant in today's times with COVID pandemic. If you had one of those newer ones, you can tell how saturated your oxygen is. But I digress. And how that relates to the sleep is during your sleep, you have normal sleep patterns where you're in light sleep and you go to deep sleep and back and you cycle through. So the device is picking up on your heart rate in relation to what it knows the standard heart rate rhythm is through circadian sleep. So that's how that's picking that up. I believe I answered the whole question. Great. So yes, sleep is one of those behaviors that you can monitor on a lot of these different devices. And not only physical activity, but like how the physical activity is tracked, because we all like to exercise in different ways, and then other biometric information that you may be interested in. So as you see across the top, you have the 9 different devices that we looked at in this study. The blue box indicates that that feature is present in that specific device. And you can see there is some variability between 2 models within the same brand. So if I look at the center, Vivo Move and Vivo Smart, for instance, those are both Garmin type brands. The Vivo Smart 4 has the built-in GPS, so it will tell you, like, if you like to do long distance running or biking, it will monitor your GPS for you, whereas the Vivo Move HR will not. So there are differences within a brand, but overall you can see there's a lot of blue on the screen. So most of these devices do a lot of these things. They do vary quite a bit in battery length. They will all measure your sedentary behavior or how long are you sitting. Most will also monitor your sleep, and then almost most will also track your nutrition in some way or partner with another app that will. They will all measure the distance that you traveled through physical activity, your energy expenditure, so how many calories you're burning. And one of the latest trends is they're all water resistant. So, or at least the 9 that we looked at. So you can wear them when you do swimming activities, not deep sea swimming, because it's only water resistant to a point. They're not waterproof, just water resistant for like lap swimming and what have you. But as you can see, there's some variability across all the devices. Which kind of brings me to the last topic of my talk, in which wearable is right for you. And I'm sure you want me to look at you virtually through this camera and tell you, you need exactly this device. Unfortunately, I'm not going to tell you that, because there are a lot of different devices out there. And it really depends on like what your goals are and what's important to you. So some things to consider that when you're looking at wearable fitness trackers. First and foremost, will it monitor your favorite activity? If you are an avid biker and you want to bike, will the activity monitor track that? Unfortunately, most of them won't, because your upper limbs, your hands are relatively stationary throughout a bike. So it won't pick that up as exercise. There are a lot of clips and like shoe insoles that would be able to track that activity a little better, or the devices that have that built-in GPS, you can log it as an exercise and it will try to estimate your calories based on that, but it won't, because it can pick up your speed and your distance, but it won't be tracking your heart rate in the same way. That's something to consider if you're an avid biker. Now, if you're just like a gym rat and like to be in the gym all day, every day, that's still something to consider. Like, do you want necessarily a device that may be water resistant if it's going to cost like an extra 50 bucks, but that's not how you exercise? It's something to consider. Also, which biometrics are you interested in? Are you all about steps? Are you all about getting your 10,000 steps per day? Well, good news is all the devices will track your steps. Not all devices will track your swimming laps the way that you want. Not all devices will track or will separate the types of calories that you're burning. If you're just more of a lifestyle activity person who gets in exercise when they can, versus if you have goals to burn so many calories per each workout, not all devices are going to separate those the way that Fitbit does, for instance. So that's also something to consider. Do you want to know heart rate, or are you really interested in like your VO2 max? So again, that's an indicator for your fitness. Not all devices are going to be able to track that. So if those biometrics are what you're interested in, make sure that you find a device that suits your needs. And does the utility work for you? Will it be feasible for you to have a device that you're going to have to charge every day? Or do you need one that just needs like an hour long charge once a week or even once a month? Because there are some devices out there that can be charged as infrequently as once or every 2 months. So what types of those utilities are going to be useful for you? Also, do you want it connected to your phone? A lot of these wearable fitness trackers these days have that connection to your phone, so you can see your phone alerts, you can see your text message, you can see your email all through the device. Maybe you don't want that. And if that's something that's important to you, don't select a device that will sync your phone and have your phone on your wrist. Last thing to consider, what behavioral support do you need? Are you a beginner who just needs that more encouragement to get out and do it? So maybe the Fitbit with their guided programs is best for you. Do you need that extra sense of community and support? Finding those devices where you can build that in that will help you to stay on track. Other types of support, let's say that maybe you don't need a lot of support behaviorally to keep going. You're already doing a good job. So maybe just having a badge every once in a while as a congratulations, keep it up. Maybe that's more important to you. So that's something that you should consider when selecting a device. And I do see some questions are coming up, which is great because that's the end.
Great, thank you so much.
Go back. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have there's a number of questions that came through. There's a question here about the Apple Watch and how it's been heard that they will alert the wearer if they have a medical problem with their heart. Is that common in other products?
Because Apple did it, others are going to follow suit to stay competitive. As I'm aware right now, Garmin has a few devices that will track your, so Garmin's the one that will track your VO2, so your fitness level. They haven't gotten to the point of checking your EKG. So that's ultimately what the Apple Watch is doing. It does have a disclaimer that it can't tell you whether you're having a medical emergency or not. It's just more informative, where you have it on your wrist and then you also put your finger on the dial. So it has two different forms of heart rate that's picking up on to come up with the estimated EKG or your heart rhythm. As of right now, Apple's the only one who's doing it. By Christmas season, I guarantee you that will not be true because this market is heavily competitive and they are always trying to one up one another. But that being said, the Apple Watch doesn't necessarily track your O2 saturation, which is very critical in times like COVID pandemic when oxygen saturation is important if someone does come down with COVID-19. So
kind of going along that, there's a great question here about, do you think in the future they'll have more options to adjust the sensor feedback on like skin?
I don't necessarily think they'll have options. I don't see them working in a way where they're going to allow users to test that sensitivity, but over time, I do know that the technology is just going to get better. So it won't, if you are really sensitive to those trackers, over time, they're going to improve that technology where it's not going to be as sensitive to the wearer, but I do not see them moving forward, allowing the wearer to determine what level that it's going to track your heart rate.
Great. I'm gonna just open this up and let, if anybody wants to chime in and ask their questions, I think that'd be great. And my camera keeps freezing on me, so.
Oh, I'll jump. I have a question. So with your experience studying, human behavior and how people react when they're interacting with their wearable technology, with that list of the behavior change techniques, are there any that you think are going to be the next big thing that get incorporated into these fitness trackers?
That's a great question. So if you would have asked me this question 8 years ago, I would have said biofeedback, measuring heart rate, because that wasn't standard back in the day. Now it is standard. I don't necessarily see, so the interesting thing is I do think that they will develop more ways, like being able to check your EKG, for instance, your heart rhythm and your VO2 max. I think those are going to become more standard. But in relation to the behavioral change techniques, that all falls under biofeedback. So that's not necessarily capturing a new technique to change behavior. Sorry, I'm mentally going through the list of the 93 right now. And if there are any that I could see, I could probably, bargaining is one. So as these technologies advance, like getting more interactive. So giving, I know I already just said that I don't see the devices allowing the wearer to like change the level of sensitivity, but I do see going towards a way where the wearer has more control over like what is being measured and when it's being measured. So that's a behavioral change category of like bargaining and creating contracts where the device is a little bit less static and more interactive, and it becomes more like a personal coach versus something that just passively tells you your data.
We've got a question in the chat. I'll jump in. Do you think that the different workouts to choose from on your Apple Watch actually make a difference on the number of calories burned?
So not on the number of calories burned. For anyone who's not familiar, you can, with the Apple Watch specifically, you can choose what workout you're about to do, like if it's yoga versus Pilates versus CrossFit versus strength training, circuit training. There's a whole host of options that you can select. It won't affect your calories burned because your calorie burned is a direct reflection of your heart rate, given your other information that you inputted, like your sex given at birth, your age, and your weight, and your heart rate. That's going to calculate your calories for that. It will help to see how accurate your heart rate reading is going to be in that different position. So for instance, if you're doing a lot of strength training, you may not be moving your wrist that much. Especially if you're doing like lower body work, you may not be moving your wrist that much. That will pick up all of that movement and activity, but it will still keep track of those different types. So, sorry, I'm getting circular train of thought here. Short answer is it helps to establish the type of workout you're doing, which will improve the method that it's tracking your heart rate. but at the end of the day, your calories burned is a reflection of your heart rate. So yes, in a way, but at the end of the day, if you were to select strength training, we really did cross training, it's not that big of a difference. It also, all of this data goes back to Apple. So it helps them get better at detecting heart rate.
I could give you a question from Mark. He was asking, do you think that MDs are interested in diagnosing based on wearable biomonitors? And is the data relevant enough for them? And I thought that was a cool question. So I kind of thought about it maybe similar to diabetic wearables, where they can provide the insulin when needed, instead of having to inject themselves throughout the day. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think short answer, most definitely. It gets a little kind of politics in terms of medical research versus commercially available. So I can't necessarily speak to if doctors are going to say your Fitbit measured this, therefore I believe your Fitbit, just because of the research politics that goes behind it, because Fitbit is a commercial product, even though it is heavily researched. They have exercise physiologists developing these technologies, but there isn't always that communication between industry and practice. So that could be a hiccup, but there are wearables out there that aren't on the commercial market that are specifically targeted for medical diagnosis. Not to say that the science between the two is different. It just comes down to who made it, who has the funding, which field that it's in. Moving forward, I do think that insurance is going to be a really big driver here, believe it or not, because some insurance companies will give you a deductible if you have a wearable that is proven to help improve your overall health. And the insurance company may work with the medical professionals in terms of like, hey, we have this data from them because they had a Fitbit or another type of wearable, and this can inform diagnoses. So yes, but it's not going to be as simple as your doctor reading your Fitbit and saying like, oh, based on these readings, I can strongly suggest that you do have heart arrhythmia.
Dean Baskey has a question.
Thanks. Hi, Koya. So great to listen. I don't know if I'll ever wear a Fitbit, but I wanted to ask, because the main input variable is essentially the heart rate, usually, right? And then what you're looking at is your calories burned. So I'm just curious, because the calories you burn is, of course, not just a simple your weight and your height at all, or just your weight. It depends on your percentage of body fat and then how fit and so on. So are there any Fitbits that allow you to kind of essentially reference that appropriately so you know that you are burning those number of calories? Because I mean, I don't know how much variation there is, but if it's just weight, it can be very different between people, right?
Yes, absolutely. No. I mean, which is a great point. So there are different devices that use like biological impedance to estimate how much muscle you have versus how much fat you have. That technology as of right now is not embedded within these devices just because of the mechanism. So to semi-accurately estimate your body composition, you need to have two outputs.
Right.
So you either have to have an handheld going through one arm throughout your body and out the other, or up one foot and out the other foot. Yep. When it's on your wrist, it doesn't have that two outputs. So maybe in technology, the way that Apple Watch now, if you put your finger at the end of it, can do an EKG, maybe in the future we should write a letter, tell them to give me money so we can study it at Cal Poly to embed that, body composition.
Or just let you input it if you did, because I have one of those to do the impedance to figure out your percentage of fat and muscle. And so if it allowed you to put it in, at least when you're seeing numbers, maybe they're within 5-10% of the real numbers of what you're burning. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I got a small question.
Yeah.
I got a question about, so I saw in the chart that there was a how to measure stress on some of them. How is that tracked? Is it by heart rate? Is it using other metrics?
It's heart rate is the main one. And when I say it tracks stress, it's not necessarily tracking if you are in a stressful situation. It's more of allowing you to track your mindfulness. So not a lot of devices are two-way. Not all of them will pick up like, hey, your heart rate's spiking. Are you working out? Are you stressed? Maybe you should take a minute to breathe. Not all of them are like that. Most of them are just like, hey, here's a gentle reminder that you should do some sort of guided breathing or guided meditation at this time without taking into account whether you're completely calm laying in bed versus exercising, because you can set it on a timer like once a day, every other day.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
There is one question here about Google. Since Google now owns Fitbit, what do you expect any major enhancements to Fitbit, and what do you think Google will do with the data? Since you're a Google expert,
Yeah, I haven't thought about the data. Google has a lot of data on you. So I can imagine that Google will make it more personalized for the user, just knowing Google as a brand, since they love to tell you exactly what you want to buy without you having to say it out loud. I can see how they're moving Fitbit to that more individualized feedback. So maybe not everyone sees the same feedback in the same way. Otherwise, I don't foresee any major changes to Fitbit because of the acquisition from Google necessarily. I see it more as a competing market. So Apple's going to make Fitbit better and Fitbit's going to make Apple better and vice versa.
So we've got, I think, 2 more questions in the chat, and then that I think is probably going to bring us until all the way up to 8 o'clock. So the first question is, do you know if any of the major wearables measure heart rate variability as it connects to stress?
Apple, in theory, because it does the EKG, but it's not tying it to your stress. It's more of, it will hold that data and it will keep that data and it will remember it, but it's not going to associate that with the mindfulness breathing that you're doing through the app. Other devices, I'm not aware if they're doing anything.
All right. And then the last one I think is a great one to end on, because it brings us back to that learn by doing practical question. For someone who has never worn a wearable before, how do you make sure that you're wearing it properly? Are they heavy? Do they have to go above the wrist or a particular position on where it should be to get the most accurate data?
Yeah, this is a great question. Depends on the device. Some of them are a little bit heavier, like as if you're wearing a big gaudy watch. Other ones are really slim. You may forget that they're there. Regardless of it, the wearing placement doesn't matter too much. It should be snug. It should be tight against the skin, so it's not loose and falling up and down your arm. But the key thing that most people, even if you do have a wearable, they don't calibrate it. So no matter how you wear it, because you can either wear it on the inside of your wrist, your outside of your wrist, left or right, tell it which side that you're wearing it on. And once you get a position that's comfortable, where it's flush with your skin, you need to calibrate the device. And the app should walk you through that. And it measures, like, it'll ask you to take a few steps and track that. Once you calibrate it, the tracking should be relatively accurate. Most people don't calibrate it though. So this is your reminder for all the wearable fitness tracker wearers out there in the virtual world: calibrate your device.
All right, I think that brings us to the end of our time together. So please join me in thanking Dr. Zakkoyya Lewis-Trammell for such a wonderful presentation tonight. I've learned so much information. It was fantastic to have you. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to come and with the science on tap and learn how Fitbit will make us fit. So thank you all.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.